Freud, the secret world inside you. Who was Freud? Psychoanalysis and its philosophical role. Welcome back to Philosopher Mindful. Today we journey into a domain that doesn't lie outside us, but within. A world not made of streets or borders, but of thoughts, fears, dreams, and desires. A world that we often try to ignore. But one man made it his mission to explore it. Sigmund Freud, born in 1856 in what is now the Czech Republic. Freud was trained as a neurologist, but he didn't remain in the clean world of nerves and anatomy. Instead, he turned his attention toward something messier, deeper, and infinitely more mysterious: the human mind. Freud is known as the father of psychoanalysis, a field that blurs the lines between science, philosophy, and narrative. Though not a science in the strict sense, psychoanalysis is one of the most influential frameworks ever created for understanding how the human psyche works. But why does Freud matter to philosophy? Because Freud shattered a myth that had shaped Western thought for centuries. The myth that man is a rational being. From Descartes to Kant, from Plato to modern liberalism, the dominant view was that human beings are defined by their reason, that we act based on logic, on knowledge, on conscious will. Freud turned that idea upside down. He argued that we are strangers to ourselves, that beneath our conscious mind lies a vast, hidden realm, the unconscious, filled with urges, fears, and memories that shape our behavior far more than reason ever could. You don't simply think, you are moved by forces you don't fully understand. You don't simply choose. You are driven by something ancient, repressed, and often disturbing. Freud's insight was devastating. The ego is not master in its own house, and that single idea that we are not in control had immense philosophical consequences. It opened the door to new interpretations of ethics, freedom, identity, and suffering. It forced us to reconsider the meaning of truth, of guilt, of morality, and it revealed that much of what we call civilization is built not on peace, but on repression. Freud was not just a psychologist. He was a cartographer of the mind, mapping a territory that is invisible yet omnipresent, a philosopher of the hidden self. In this chapter, we will explore Freud, not as a clinician, but as a thinker, a man who forced us to ask, what lies beneath our everyday behavior? Are we truly free or puppets of our inner drives? And can self-knowledge ever be complete? Welcome to the secret world inside you. Conscious vs. unconscious. Who really controls us? To understand Freud's revolution, we have to grasp one central idea. The mind is not a unified whole. It is divided, split between what we know and what we repress. Freud called this split the difference between the conscious and the unconscious. The conscious mind is the part we live in daily. Our thoughts, our decisions, our plans, and our memories, those we can clearly recall and explain. But beneath that surface lies something much larger and more powerful, the unconscious. Not unconscious in the sense of sleep or coma, but unconscious in the sense of hidden. It's where all the desires we deny, the thoughts we're ashamed of, and the memories we've buried still exist. They're not gone. They're just submerged, and they act on us. You think you're angry because someone insulted you today, but maybe the anger is older. Maybe it started in childhood. Maybe it has nothing to do with today at all. Freud compared the human psyche to an iceberg. Only a small tip, the conscious, rises above the water. But the vast, dangerous mass underneath, the unconscious, is what steers the ship. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The unconscious is active. It influences your decisions. It appears in your dreams. It slips out in your jokes, your slips of the tongue, your anxieties. You think you're in control, but often you're reacting to forces inside you that you don't even see. That's why Freud's insight is not just psychological, it's philosophical. He asks, who are you, really? If your thoughts are not entirely yours, can you call yourself if you don't even know the full content of your mind? And what is morality if guilt is something that can exist before you're even conscious of why? Freud didn't see the unconscious as evil, but he did see it as powerful. It's the source of creativity, dreams, desire, and love, but also of fear, neurosis, and compulsion. He showed us that to understand ourselves, we have to listen to the things we're not saying, to the images in our dreams, to the tremble behind our words, to the truth we hide even from ourselves, because until we do, we are not fully awake. The inner conflict, id, ego, and superego. If the unconscious shapes us, then what exactly is inside it? Freud proposed a model of the mind made up of three forces, constantly pulling us in different directions. This psychic struggle is what gives birth to conflict, anxiety, guilt, and civilization itself. These three forces are the id, the ego, and the superego. The id, I want. The id is the oldest part of us. Primitive, raw, and irrational. It is where our instincts and drives live, especially the sexual drive, libido, and the death drive, aggression, destruction. It doesn't care about rules, time, or consequences. It wants pleasure. It wants it now. The id is your hunger, your lust, your rage, your fantasy. It is the child inside you screaming, I want this. I don't care how. Give it to me. Freud believed this wild force never goes away. We repress it, disguise it, but it remains the engine of desire behind much of our behavior. The superego, you must not. The superego is the internal voice of authority. It's your moral conscience, shaped by parents, teachers, religion, and society. It says, you shouldn't do that. That's wrong. Good people don't act like that. It's the part of you that feels guilt, shame, or pride. It judges your impulses. It punishes your desires. It enforces the rules you've internalized, even if they're harmful, outdated, or irrational. In some cases, the superego becomes tyrannical. People end up punishing themselves for simply being human. The ego. Let me balance this between these two powers, the wild urges of the id and the strict laws of the superego, stands the ego. The ego is the mediator, the part of the psyche that deals with reality. It tries to satisfy the id without upsetting the superego. It negotiates, it rationalizes, it says, maybe later. Let's find a socially acceptable way to get what we want. The ego is you, the part that faces the world, pretends to be in control, and holds everything together. But the tension is real. The ego is always under pressure, from inside and outside. And when it fails to keep the balance, we suffer. We experience anxiety, neurosis, or self-sabotage. This is Freud's vision of the human being. Not a harmonious whole, but a conflicted battlefield. a place where desire and morality collide, where the self is not one voice, but many, where freedom doesn't mean doing what you want, but understanding why you want it and what stands in your way. Repression, neurosis, and social obedience. That we've seen the battle inside the mind. Let's look at one of its most powerful weapons: repression. Repression is what happens when the ego, under pressure from the superego, decides to bury a desire deep in the unconscious. It pushes it down, hides it, and locks it away. You feel a powerful urge. It frightens you. It threatens your sense of self, your morals, and your place in society. So you pretend it's not there. You forget it. But it doesn't disappear. It festers. That buried desire doesn't stay quiet. It returns, disguised. It sneaks out through dreams, slips of the tongue, habits, fears, and compulsions. It shapes your life without your knowledge. This is how neurosis is born. A neurosis is not madness. It's internal conflict, the cost of keeping our desires repressed and our conscience clean. It might look like anxiety, depression, obsessive behavior, self-sabotage. It is the ego struggling to maintain balance between a raging id and a judging superego in a society full of rules. And here lies Freud's greatest insight into modern life. Civilization demands repression. To live with others, we must control ourselves. We can't act on every impulse. We have to be polite, restrained, and normal. This is the price of social life. But what happens when repression goes too far? We become alienated from others, from our own bodies, and from our own desires. We live, not as ourselves, but as what we think we're supposed to be. We obey the law, but inside, we're torn apart. We smile, but we're anxious. We succeed, but we're miserable. This is not peace. This is obedience, disguised as maturity. And Freud asks us to look closer. What have you repressed? What part of yourself have you denied in order to fit in? Who are you really when you're not performing the role society gave you? Because repression may bring order, but it can also destroy authenticity. The path to healing begins not with obedience, but with awareness. Not by silencing desire, but by understanding it. Sublimation, turning desire into greatness. If repression is the force that buries our desires, then sublimation is the path that redeems them. Freud knew that not all desires can be acted upon. Some are forbidden, some are dangerous. Some would tear society apart if expressed openly. But instead of simply repressing them, we can do something more powerful. We can transform them. This is sublimation, the redirection of our raw, primal drives into something creative, productive, even beautiful. Take the sexual drive, for instance. Freud believed that much of human culture, art, science, music, literature, had emerged when this drive was channeled into higher forms. When a painter expresses forbidden longing in a masterpiece, when a poet turns heartache into verse, when a scientist obsessively searches for truth, not just knowledge, but some deeper hidden satisfaction. These are not escapes from desire. They are evolutions of it. Sublimation is what allows us to take the energy of the wild, untamed, and elevate it without denying it, to create instead of collapse, to liberate the unconscious not through breakdown, but through expression. It's a form of mastery, not through suppression, but through transformation. This is why Freud's vision isn't purely pessimistic. Yes, we are torn. Yes, we are driven by forces we barely understand, but through awareness, through analysis, and through sublimation, we can reclaim our energy and give it shape, not as repression, not as neurosis, but as art, love, insight, and freedom. The unconscious, then, is not just a trap. It is a reservoir of power, waiting to be tapped. And perhaps this is the secret Freud left us with, that to know yourself is not to control every part of you, but to stop being afraid of what you might find. If today's journey into the unconscious sparked something in you, if you felt the pull of your hidden self, the truth behind the surface, then you already understand what Freud meant. We are deeper than we appear. So if you want to keep exploring the minds that shook the world, Nietzsche, Spinoza, Fanon, Sartre, if you're ready to challenge comfort, question authority, and discover philosophy that touches the soul, then subscribe to Philosopher Mindful. One idea can change how you see everything, and we bring you hours of deep, meaningful thought without the academic jargon. Like, comment, and share your thoughts. Let's build a community that thinks bravely. See you in the next descent into the human mind.